we go. All right, guys. Like I was saying, if you are here to talk about Snap ENT and all things services mapping, you are in the right space. If you are not, if this is a surprise to you, you're welcome to stay. Interesting topic in my opinion, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So today, we want to welcome you all back. I hope your one-on-one calls have been going well. I'm happy to see so many of you in the room today. We're going to walk through Snap ENT services. Snap ENT services are bucketed into what are called components. So we'll walk through what those are and what they mean. We are going to highlight one of them. And then we're going to also talk about some additional allowable services that don't fall into components necessarily. We're going to also walk through where ESC and nonprofits are aligned in services that you are already delivering. We have a lovely example from our good friends at CEO who are on the call today. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms to discuss areas of alignment. We have some questions that we'll be posing. We're going to separate out into smaller groups, have a chat, come back, report out on how those conversations went, and then we have some action items. Any questions before we jump right in? All right. Just some reminders, be present. The content moves quickly. Feel free to put questions in the chat that one of us from the TA team will answer. Mute yourself, please, if you're not talking. Background noise like cats meowing are very distracting. It happens, just so be mindful. If you need to take a break, feel free to do so. Grab some water. These are recorded, so you can always refer back if you missed something. And then practice grace and openness. Please ask questions. This content is quite dense. It can be daunting and confusing. So all questions are welcome. And with that, I will give it to our friends at SJI to talk about services.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Dina Rader, Senior Consultant at SJI. Some of you know me from our technical assistance sessions that we've had together. And so I'm first going to start us off today in our webinar to first bring your attention to this handy little Venn diagram. You'll start to recognize this as we go through and talk about the key areas for SNAP ENT. And as you can see, there are several listed here: services, funds, participant, and capacity. Today, we're going to focus in on services. And you'll also notice there's a little green box in the middle of all three of those circles. And that's where you'll find your best opportunity to get the most out of a SNAP employment and training program when all of these key areas really come together. But today we're going to talk about services and how to align your current programming with what Sam had referred to as components. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use a service mapping tool. Many of you probably have already seen this in your Google files. Some of us have kind of walked through it initially in our TA sessions together. But really what we're going to do today is try to utilize this tool as part of an activity that we're going to have later on. And we really want you to become familiar with the F&S approved components. And these components are areas in which you probably are already providing some level of programming. And we'll dig into that a little later, what those components look like. But really, we're going to use this tool. We're going to try to assess current programming and how it aligns with the SNAP employment and training components. I do just want to say real quick, though, make sure that you are reviewing your state's plan because there's a long list of FNS approved components, but each state is different, and you'll really want to know what your state approves as eligible components. So reviewing your state plan is the best way to identify that. Okay. So as I had referred to employment and training components. So here is sort of a short list of some of those training components that are approved through FNS. There are three buckets in which FNS categorizes components. The first category is education, and as you can imagine, things like adult basic education, vocational training, are the kinds of education activities that fall under that education category. Then we have work experience, which is also include its own separate category and includes things like work activity, as well as work-based learning activities. And again, you'll hear from Nick. He'll talk a bit more about that later on in the webinar. And then lastly, the third category is non-education and non-work. And basically that's where everything else falls, like job search training, supervised job search, job retention. And you can see that there's some descriptions here to better understand what those components mean. And then you'll see the little link there at the bottom of this slide where it says official FNS SNAP E&T component table. And that will take you directly to the very long list of FNS approved components. But again, you want to check with your state plan to make sure what components are eligible in your state's employment and training program. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to talk a bit about work-based learning.
Yeah, thanks, Dina. Yeah, we're going to just spend a little bit of time looking more closely at the work experience component. And before I do that, I just want to just remind you that the list that Dina just went through, these are the SNAP E&T approved components. And one of the things you want to be thinking about, and which is part of this mapping exercise, is how is what you're doing already lining up with those different components? Are you seeing things that look like what you're doing? And so that's part of this process of assessing and aligning. But we wanted to take a couple of minutes to look at the work experience component because there have been some changes, recent changes, although they may not seem very recent because they're from the 2018 Farm Bill. But in FNS terms, it's a recent change. And so what occurred with the Farm Bill is that FNS, or the Congress actually, allowed work-based learning to become part of the work experience component. And so what that means is that state agencies were allowed to use SNAP E&T employment and training funds to provide subsidized wages to SNAP participants in work-based learning activities. So if you think of the work experience component, that includes a wide range of work activity type of opportunities, everything from volunteering maybe at a food bank to working in a social enterprise operation and a variety of other types of things. So, but what happened with the Farm Bill is that they added what's called work-based learning. And work-based learning, what's important to remember about that, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few seconds, is there's some key elements to it. There's the work-based, so work activity, and there's the learning. And so what that implies and what that means is that there's learning going on that's tied to occupational training or a specific line of work. So and so this has been a new change and a new addition coming out of the Farm Bill. What I will say is that the implementation of this change has been uneven across the country, meaning that some states have adopted work-based learning and subsidized work-based learning as a component and allowed organizations to be approved for that, and others have not. So, for example, and this isn't necessarily a complete list, but states like California, Washington, and Pennsylvania have all adopted this work-based learning aspect of the work activity or the work experience component. There's a few other states that have done that, but there's parts of the country that have not done that at all. So if you're in the southeast region of the country, this isn't an opportunity at this point anyway. But we're hoping that as time goes on, it becomes more of an opportunity across the country. Next slide, Samantha. So what is work-based learning more specifically? So it's part of the work experience component. I'll go ahead and read this. I know this is very wordy, but the work-based learning is an activity that are activities that sustain interactions with industry or community professionals in real-world settings to the extent practical, or simulated environments in an educational institution that fosters in-depth, first-hand engagement with tasks required in a given career field that are aligned to a curriculum and instruction. So essentially, what FNS is looking for are programs that offer a work-based experience that combine a curriculum or some specific learning tied to a career, matched with the opportunity to practice and to develop those skills in a work experience situation. And that can be, as they say, an actual experience within industry or a community with community professionals, or it can be in a simulated environment. And there has to be a clear connection with an occupation and employers that operate within that occupation, that hire people that are trained in that occupation. So this is what you're looking for. So as you think about your program, the work aspect of your program, what you want to be thinking about is, do you have a curriculum? Does your curriculum lead to credentials or certifications? It doesn't have to, but is that something that's happening? Is your work experience directly tied to your curriculum? So what you don't want to do, for example, not that you would, is if somebody comes in and says, I want to work in the culinary field, and you say, wonderful, we're going to have you work in our social enterprise, and our social enterprise has to do with something that has nothing to do with the culinary field. So you want to line everything up so it all matches. And then you want to make sure that this is all connected to employers and your employer partners. So next slide, Samantha.
Sorry, I'm multitasking in the Zoom.
Yeah, I understand. No
back
problem.
end.
No problem.
There's a question in the chat. Was that answered?
Maybe not. Can you?
It says, Ricky from Streets team, does the curriculum for subsidized work-based learning or work-based learning have to be approved or certified by SNAP ENT? It's a great question.
Yeah, very good question. It doesn't have to be approved or certified, although depends on how you want to define that term approved. What we have seen in practice is that the state SNAP agencies and FNS will take a look at how you've described your subsidized work-based learning program. And they'll look at how you've laid out your curriculum. And they'll want to know, does it have a sort of a schedule, like week 1 or month 1, you learn these tasks. Week 2 or month 2, you learn these tasks. And are these tasks tied to a particular career track? So that's really what they're looking for. If it's certified in some way, great, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But it has to be based in industry. Ideally, you want it informed by your employer partners. You have to, talking with your employer partners, they say, this is what we're looking for. And then that's what you design, maybe with their input. So like I said, work-based learning really covers these 3 buckets: the learning aspect, the work experience aspect, and employment. So the idea is you start, in this program, you learn the skills, you practice the skills, and there's employers that are kind of on board with this, and are there ready to employ your graduates, your program participants as they finish. Now that's kind of an ideal layout, but that's kind of the concept you wanna lay out. So the other thing I'll just point out here is that for a lot of you, I think if you're starting to think about whether you do this or not, or if you feel like you do this, how you would present this to the SNAP agency, you may want to think about or talk about your program maybe from a little different perspective. I know a lot of you talk about the work that happens in your social enterprises, and this is great stuff, as a great opportunity for people who maybe haven't worked a lot, who have had, rough experiences in the employment arena, gain confidence, develop some work skills, some soft skills, some, essential skills, build their resume, do these different types of things that are really important to putting people in a position to take that next step. For work-based learning to be approved by FNS, you have to do something more than what I just described. You have to be able to really anchor it to a career track, the skills, the hard skills attached to that career track, the work experience that aligns with that, and then employment in that field. So that's a distinction that you want to be thinking about. Next slide, Samantha. So now I want to just take a quick look at sort of why this is important from a fiscal perspective. So as I said, work-based learning, subsidized work-based learning is new, relatively new, not available across the country, but available in many of the states that you guys are operating in. One of the big advantages to being approved as a subsidized work-based learning program is that it makes you eligible for reimbursement on the subsidized wages that you're paying your participants as they go through your program. So in practice, and this is a simple example, this is what this could look like. So let's just take a look at this situation. So if your program, for example, has 10 participants in it that you're paying $15 an hour and they work 80 hours as a part of your program, that comes to $12,000 in wages. The reimbursement, the 50% reimbursement back to you is in the fourth column over, and that's $6,000. So again, if you're approved and you're doing this, you pay out $12,000 in subsidized wages, you receive a up to $6,000 reimbursement as an ENT provider. So that's a good deal. That can help you out financially. Just a reminder, these dollars come back unrestricted. You can utilize them in a variety of ways. In addition, your program has some administrative costs. These would be the costs for your staff, your trainers, your crew supervisors, individuals like that, employment specialists. And in this example, we're going to say that costs $10,000. So that $10,000 can be reimbursed at an amount of $5,000. So that's, again, a nice fiscal opportunity. What I will say is if you're doing work experience programs, you can probably get approved for the administrative costs, the $10,000, the $5,000 reimbursement. You may still have the wage costs, but if you're not approved as a subsidized work-based learning provider, then your reimbursement is $5,000, not $11,000. So this is the financial opportunity that's tied to this. And what we've seen in different parts of the country is, in particular programs that are in bigger size, have larger capacity, is the ability to be approved for subsidized work-based learning, get reimbursed for the wages, has been a big financial benefit. It's really made sort of the rigmarole that comes with being a ENT provider, the sort of the fiscal and bureaucratic stuff that goes along with it. It's made it all much more worth the effort because the return on what you're doing is just more beneficial to your organization. So in simple terms, this is kind of the way it looks. I think I had another question. Did we?
There's two questions.
Oh, there's two. Okay.
Yeah. So Mike Roberts is asking, can we braid these with funds with others? So I'll let you answer that question first, and then we'll go to the second question.
Sure. Yeah, they can be braided. That gets kind of more into the specifics of what you're braiding them with. But there's always an opportunity to braid funds with SNAP ENT and WIOA dollars and other types of federal programs. Just remember that if these are federal dollars, they're not going to generate a reimbursement, but they may provide, sort of an essential aspect to your program that's needed for this whole thing to work. I don't know if that's a very clear, specific answer, but yes, braiding is possible.
And then Mike's second question, and Mike, feel free to come off mute if you have any follow-up questions, is what is the source of funds?
So when you say the source of funds, are you talking about the funds for the wages or for the administrative costs?
Sure. So I guess what we've always tried to make sure we're doing is like because we could have several federal grants. Well, first,
Hmm.
let me back up and say that we run a lot of registered apprenticeship programs. We have a skill bridge program, we have a pre-apprenticeship program, we have a state apprenticeship program. So
Right.
each of them has varying levels of like documentation, and almost all of them, if they're an apprenticeship, all the apprenticeship programs have wages that are paid to participants, right? And
Right.
so we generally will look at something like if the source of funds is WIOA, then we can only dip into that one bucket. We can't like combine that with other WIOA
Hmm.
source of funds streams. And then similarly, like if it's a federal grant that's coming from the DOL, like we can't double dip and have two DOL grants. We have to kind of
Exactly.
make sure they're separated and they're not the same source of funding. So that's what I'm trying to kind of understand. Like let's use a practical example. Let's say we are paying the wages of a person, paying them a living wage. So in San Diego, that's like, let's say $25 an hour.
Hmm.
And let's say we got a OJT contract from the local workforce board for 50% of their wages to be reimbursed for six
Hmm.
months. Would
Right.
we also be able to stack on top of that this 12,000 for the remaining 50% of the wages, getting like
So,
100% covered, or
yeah.
is
So
that
that's a
not?
good question, and this gets into the specifics, which we're happy to talk more about. Probably works better in a TA session. But
Sure.
if you get into the details of how FNS has laid out subsidized work-based learning, there are different models that are approved and work differently. So, for example, a transitional jobs program, an internship program, um, they are eligible for the wage reimbursement. If it's an actual OJT, WIOA, DOL approved, then, and this is the details, the wages are not eligible for reimbursement in that particular modality. And there's a long reason for that that we should probably talk about offline, or outside of this. But I guess one thing I would say is that we're giving you sort of a tip of the iceberg description, maybe more than a tip of the iceberg description of subsidized work-based learning, but enough to kind of give you a sense of what the opportunity is and what to be thinking about. Um, the devil is definitely in the details. And I know that FNS is really big on apprenticeships, but you do have to look, closely at the actual format that you're getting your dollars for the wage subsidy.
I will also say, so Riley had us the same question, like, can we go a little bit, talk more about braiding and blending funds? I will call out, we have a session all about fiscal basics, and it does include braiding and blending funds. So fear not, more to come on this topic. But these are
Mhm.
questions, and I'm
Yeah,
excited that folks are asking them because we have a whole session dedicated to just this.
right. Yeah. I mean, the general answer is yes, you can braid funding. And the other word of caution is you have to do it very carefully. So for what that's worth. So anyway, we just want to give you a little bit of information on the work-based learning component, the work-based learning aspect of the work experience component, subsidized work-based learning, and why this is important. And I think as we meet for our TA sessions, we can talk about this more specifically based on your organization, where you are and what you're looking at, and kind of how you lay out your work experience type programs.
Yeah,
So,
Wanda has her hand up.
okay.
Hi, I after my one-on-one with my team, Tyree and the others,
Mhm.
um, they encouraged me to um, work with CowFresh
Yes.
However, CalFresh has informed me that I would need to go to workforce, San Diego workforce, because CalFresh currently works only with the community college districts, which was disheartening.
Well,
And I just thought, well, okay, so now I need to figure out another way. And if I went to the workforce board, is that also an opportunity or will it be prevented because of WIOA?
so I can answer that quickly. So what I know about San Diego County is that their SNAP ENT program or their CFEP program for community-based organizations is operated by the San Diego Workforce Partnership, which is their workforce board. It's an intermediary. And you see that from place to place across the country. In LA, it's Department of Economic Opportunity. So, what that means for you and for others is that you would be, instead of talking with your state SNAP agency or your county SNAP agency, you'd be talking to the workforce board, which works on behalf of those organizations, those, the state and the county. So I would say you should still feel optimistic about the opportunity. And I know the woman who runs their program. She's great. She works really well with community partners. So I wouldn't feel discouraged at all. And that's something that I think we as a TA team can talk with you about and assist you with moving forward.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so a couple other services that are part of the services bucket of SNAP ENT. So in addition to the components. So one is an employability assessment. And this is something I'm sure many of you do, but there's a requirement from FNS expectation that prior to placing somebody into a component, you do an assessment, employability assessment. And you don't necessarily have to use a standard employability assessment, but there are, that's authorized by FNS, but you do want to be focused on what FNS has identified as important aspects of that assessment. People's work history, their skills, their interests, things like that. So from that assessment, you identify an employment goal and a service plan. And ideally, the components will help fill out that service plan and help people move towards their employment goal. So, you want to be thinking, do we do an employability assessment? Do we need to tighten ours up, refine it a little bit? That's, these are the questions you want to be thinking about. And of course, case management, which I think was mentioned at least briefly during the components discussion. So case management has to be something that is part of all the components, and it typically starts sort of in alignment or at the same time as the employability assessment, identifying people's barriers, obstacles, and needs, related to employment, and beginning to lay out a plan to address those, which can include supportive services. So those are a couple other things to be thinking about as you kind of go through this assessment as to, how well do we stack up? Where do we align with all of this? Next slide. So one other quick sort of thing to take a look at is we've looked at the components, which is this, on this gray list down the side of the slide. And then you want to look at kind of what how your program works and how your program is laid out. And all programs are laid out a little bit differently, but this diagram is generally reflective of many social enterprises. So you do recruitment, assessment, you do maybe some soft skills training, you move people into transitional employment and onto job placement, and then various other things happen kind of along the way. So you want to be thinking again of how these components, which of these components line up with what you're already doing. So this is just another way to look at this, message we're trying to get across, which is probably getting even redundant at this point, doing this self-assessment and lining up your program. So at this point, I want to hand it over to my colleagues at CEO, and they're going to talk about their program because they're an ENT provider and kind of how they take a look at all this.
Thank you, Nick.
Sure.
Okay, good. That means everybody can hear me. My name is
Yes.
Tyree Selinsky. I'm from CEO. I'm with my colleagues Riley and Emily. We're just going to talk about quickly what CEO does to fulfill these SNAP ENT components with services wise. CEO is a nonprofit organization that helps those coming home from incarceration get back into the workforce. Our goal is workforce development. Workforce development is development in order to sustain a sustainable job. We provide job readiness training while we would provide immediate employment. We have different contracts, such as with the state and city beautification, where we're able to provide immediate income to those who come through our organization while we're working with them with resume building and job searching and job coaching. Once they get into a job, we support them for a year in our retention services, checking in with them once a month, verifying that they have a job, but basically being that support. So just in case they need to come back, they are able to stay in contact with us and stay employed if they need to. This kind of fits the SNAP ENT goal because it fits all the different components that are listed here: job readiness training, transitional employment, job coaching and placement, and retention services for 1 year. What I do want to say is when it comes to your organization, the goal is not to fit all of these components, but to fit at least one. We have the benefit to where our organization's motto just normally fits through all of these. But when you are doing your service mapping, the goal is just to see what in your organization fits the SNAP ENT components. And this is just how we fit into what SNAP ENT considers eligible service wise. Thanks, Nick.
I think we're moving on to the mapping activities. Dina, you want to move us
Yeah.
forward on that?
You
Thanks.
bet. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've heard tip of the iceberg on work-based learning. You heard from Tyree how CEO was able to map out their current programming that they're already providing and aligning it with the employment and training components. And so that's basically what we're going to do today. And really the benefits of going through this exercise is that it one allows you to identify current programming that you're already providing, you're already paying for, that aligns with one of the ENT components. It's really sort of this mapping tool that you can use as a living document. One, it can serve the purpose of helping you write your proposal once you get to a place to respond to your state's RFP to become a third-party provider or a SNAP ENT provider. It helps you map out sort of your service delivery, your program delivery, the service flow, and then the tasks that come along with those kinds of operational flows. And then of which it's a map of which you can use as sort of your starting point or your implementation of your program. And then it does again help identify tasks. And there may be tasks that that are currently already being provided, but maybe there's some tweaks that need to happen to some of those work tasks that are happening. Maybe you need some training. Your staff needs some training or some additional documentation or information in order to fully complete those activities to align to the components. And then really, if you think about that Venn diagram that I talked about earlier, when all of those areas come together and they overlap, and I had referred to that in the middle as your best opportunity to have a successful ENT program. It's also that opportunity to get the most out of your budget as far as reimbursement, so that you're not leaving any dollars on the table. You're identifying all of the areas in which you're already providing a service that aligns with the FNS approved component or components as your best return on your reimbursement. And then as well, it's a tool that can help prepare you for monitoring or auditing because it sort of gives you this sort of linear look at the work that's being done and how it fits the allowable requirements for the component or components that you're providing. So that's basically what we're going to do today with this mapping tool. And then I think if we can jump to the next slide. Thanks, Sam. So as Sam has mentioned early on this morning, we're going to have this activity. So we're going to get into breakouts. And again, each of your groups are going to be staffed by our team. And we'll pull up the service mapping tool and we'll really sort of walk through it as a group and talk about how, you would review the components that we have listed. It's not a full list, but it is there. There are some examples there. We show, we give you some example areas in which, like Tyree had explained how some of their current programming fit into components. We'll sort of give you some examples on how to really evaluate that, and then maybe some, changes or tweaks that you need to make to your current tasks or service delivery so that it really fully aligns with a specific component or components. And basically, that's what the tool is for, is to align your current programming, what you're already providing, you're already paying for, and how it fits in to one or more of the approved components. And so as we're in our groups, yeah, so this is kind of an example where we would think about, evaluate like job retention. What does that look like in your agency? And then maybe what additional things you would need to, augment the current programming that you're providing so that it nicely fits into the component. So this slide is a good example of that. And then as we're working through the document, these are some questions to consider as we go through our discussion together. Okay,
All
I think
right,
I'm going to
guys.
turn it over
So
to Sam.
yeah, so these are our breakout rooms. I do see that Andrew is actually not on this call, so I will take breakout room 3 for us. My mistake. So as you can see on the screen, we'll have 6 breakout rooms with leads for each. So please take a look here to see which breakout room you will put yourself into. We will launch them in just a moment. We'll be in our breakout rooms to answer the questions that were on the previous slide, which I will also drop into the chat here in a moment. You'll have like 30 seconds to take note of which breakout room you'll be in before we set them out. We'll be in them for about 5 to 6 minutes just to get the conversation going in preparation for your next TA call and to continue working on this mapping tool. Are we ready? I'll take that as a yes. Go ahead and put yourself into your assigned room as you see on the screen. Anna and Kennedy, please choose whichever one you would like for the groups that you're working with.
I'm not seeing a breakout room button yet.
It looks like people, let's see here. Who said that? Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. Which org are you
see a
with?
breakout room either. This is Lisa.
4.
I should also be in 4.
Let's see. I can do it manually. Let's see. Let me do this.
I think you're putting me in 2 and I should be going to 4. I'm happy to go to 2 though.
Let's see. Ricky. It says, let's see, there we go.
Thank you.
Yes. Hey guys, okay, sorry about that. Let me put up this slide and our questions here. This is very complex to host and do these breakout rooms at the same time. Excuse me. Let's see here. Let me broadcast these questions.
I can't
Okay.
send you the zip file, Christian. I'm trying to share the oh, there we go. The zip folder with you of the Alliance logos. Here we go. I'll let Karina know I'm doing it. I have a quick break in my meeting, so I'm gonna send it to you.
Has everyone had a chance
But
to
you as a
talk?
viewer. Oops.
Has everyone had a chance to meet one-on-one with their TA team? And okay, oh, look at this. Everyone is so great. Okay, so just quickly, what elements of your program model feels most aligned with the components and services that we just talked about? Just come off mute and, or I can tell people.
Hi, Nolga from Three Square. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so for me, it's kind of a little challenging also because we don't have anything established yet. We are kind of in the process of establishing our workforce development program where we're kind of gathering, all the information and how are we going to do the process. But from what I can see right now, the things that we have kind of in place now that we're going to be moving forward with, because we're going to have a curriculum. So we're going to have classroom time as well as, on site in the actual kitchen training, because it's going to be a culinary workforce development to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, I guess, a little bit of that education part. We're going to have the on-site training. I forget what other specifics were on that chart that they showed us, but it seemed like a lot of those will hit the points that we're thinking of moving forward with. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to share? I want to make sure we have enough time for folks to chat. Apologies, the content took a little bit longer, so we have a little bit less time in these breakout rooms. But feel free to also reach out to your TA team. You can set up additional meetings outside of just your regular monthly to if that's needed. You can tell them I told them. Any components or things we talked about that don't align?
Yeah, I came off mute. So ours pretty much aligns with our Youth AI program. The only thing that we've been working on, and that's a gap, is that employer partner piece. I mean, we've been working diligently on it, but we're also in a remote area. We're doing tech, IT training. Can you hear me?
Yeah. What org are you with?
Project Joy, me and
Okay.
David.
So we have a session all about employer engagement with
Awesome.
our good friends at Fair Start. They are incredible to work with. I think Three Square, I'm gonna make a note to directly connect you guys.
What was the name of the agency again?
It's Fair Start.
Fair Start. Okay.
They're on the call today, actually. And they help that piece of
Okay, because that's our
yeah.
gap, and we've been trying to fill it for over a year, so
We
it's
got
been a little
you.
tough. Yay!
So I
That's
will,
amazing.
yeah, definitely. I will make sure that you get connected. That session, if you go onto the landing page, you'll see where it is in the schedule, but I'll
Okay.
to you directly too.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Samantha.
just to throw it out there, First Start is amazing.
I'm like a super fan of them. I live like 2 minutes away from their cafe and I'm there all the time. So I might be a little biased.
I don't
Anyone?
want to take up space. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, anyone else? Any other thoughts? Case management, supportive services, questions?
I would also add the case management. David probably would agree. You know, we're doing like facilitating. We have the education piece, so we're facilitating the education piece, and then we're placing them with an offsite employer for the internship, paid internship. But we're not really doing like the whole case management, and that's a whole different staffing, layer maybe or skill set.
Okay.
So
I think for us, case management isn't like in the sense of really the social services because we provide paid internships for young people. So what we kind of consider our interaction with our job coaches is more of kind of a mentorship program that also provides additional, one-on-one timing and coaching. Some of them may during that time talk about, you know, the difficulty and maybe transportation is because of their
Yeah.
situation with where they live or their family situation. And so then if it becomes something where we can't handle, we have resources that we can, direct them to.
Mhm.
But I think we might be in the same situation where, my definition of case management is slightly different in this in where I work right now because
Okay,
of what we
yeah,
do.
we can work on that with your TA team. I have to close the breakout room, so I'll see you in the
Oh,
same room in like
okay.
a couple
oh,
seconds.
that
All
was
right.
helpful
Thank you.
though. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I guess we all are
We're leaving.
we're leaving.
Okay.
All right, guys, I think everyone's coming back. Apologies that felt a little quick. The content took a little more time, but I think the questions were great, so we can be flexible, right? So just quickly, maybe if we want to highlight 3 things that we chatted about real quick in our breakout rooms, I would love to hear. You can continue these conversations in your one-on-one TA calls with your teams, of course. We encourage that. But if 3 highlights just quickly, I would love to hear.
I can go, Sam,
Yeah.
real quick. So we had a chance just to quickly go through the service mapping tool, looked at the descriptions, and then had one of our social enterprises sort of report out what that would look like for them. And so we focused in on the work experience.
Hot
And
topic.
actually, yeah, it is a hot topic. And in particular, for notes or any kind of next steps, would be for them to identify the funding opportunity and the grading opportunity. So that would be a next step for them under the work-based learning. However, they felt like probably 5 out of all of those, the list of components, they were, based on the descriptions, they were like, we can do job search training, we can do the work-based learning, we can do participant reimbursement or supportive services, case management, and so on. So there were lots of different areas in which they saw themselves doing that work already.
Nice. Maybe one more highlight. We had a great question in our group about employer engagement and sort of what the definition of case management is. So definitely follow up with your TA team to do a dive into that for your specific organization. But those are really great questions. Shannon, thank you for joining the breakout session with Grow Good. I will be connecting you with our friends at Project Joy as well, or have our TA team do that because they had a employer connection specific question, which is paving the way for our session that we'll talk all about that as well. I love
Awesome. Have lots to share.
Anyone else dying to share a highlight? All right, guys. So next steps. So before your next one-on-one call with your TA team, please complete that mapping tool that we just went over as much as you can. Save all your questions in your shared folder. You can put it right on your running agenda where you have your work plan. Continue updating that work plan alongside your TA team. That just keeps us all organized and our goals, eyes to what our goals are, which those goals may shift as you move through the cohort. I am excited to talk about our next topic, which is all about staff mapping and capacity there. A lot of the questions today are actually, we actually have full sessions coming up. So if you go back to that landing page, where we post the recordings, our tools, our resources on Red F Workshop, which I will drop in the chat again. You can see the schedule. So all of your questions actually have full sessions associated with them, which is very exciting. I love when happy coincidences like this happen. So fear not, we have sessions for all of your questions. I will post this recording and slide deck on this landing page, which you can find in the link that was just put in the chat, along with all of our other resources and things as we move through the cohort. And then the FNS components table, the official document that is a little more dense than the one that we shared today. If you want to take a look at that, please do. Any questions that you have for your TA team, please feel free to follow up. I'm also available as a resource. Any questions? I feel like we're right on time, so doing well. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop the recording.